Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. So I want to consider a little bit this evening what is meditation and why do we meditate. In its simplest description, you could say meditation is a paradox that we're undertaking a completely artificial exercise in order to experience a more natural state of mind. It's artificial in the sense that what it is essentially is a deliberate paring down of the usual complex experience. We go to a quiet place, we try and remove external distractions and stimulus. We try and avoid moving the body, keeping the body still, and we try and still the mind by the exercise of taking an object. In our ordinary activities of life, we are experiencing constantly changing stimulus, and we're acting and doing and making decisions on a momentary basis, and neither the body nor the mind is really still. So this makes it difficult to be fully awake and aware. It's not impossible, that's what we should be striving towards, but it's more difficult in busyness. But when you take on a formal practice of meditation, you're simplifying the externals to such a degree that is possible, and allowing the simplicity of the experience to access a more natural state of mind. The mind that's behind and between thoughts, for example. Yeah. Often people are, especially if you have a busy life and you have many things going on, the mind can be caught in a tangle of continuously of thinking, and most of it is not even useful or productive thinking. It's just little fragments of this and that. It's a very common experience. I've seen it a few times, that someone who's new to meditation will come out here, and if they're doing a personal retreat, and if they're seriously working at it, by about day 2 or 3, they come and tell me they think they're going crazy. And I ask them, well, what do you mean you think you're going crazy? And they say, well, my thoughts are just this constant crazy jumble of nonsense. And one woman came up with a perfect description. She said, it's like there's half a dozen radios in my cabin, and they're fading in and out different channels all the time. And I reassure them, calm them down, say, you're not going crazy. You're just becoming conscious of your thought process for the first time, that your thoughts have been like that all your life, and now you're just becoming conscious of it, so it seems overwhelming. And With further persistence, the thoughts that now brought into the eye of consciousness, they sort themselves out. They become quieter. So the ideal meditation, the perfect meditation, would be to do nothing at all. To reach this epitome of just doing absolutely nothing. There's a quite charming story about Milarepa, the Tibetan sage, that one time he was wandering. He's like a wandering holy man, a yogi, and he's wandering and he sees some people, like an extended family. They were doing some construction project. They were building a house or barn or something, and he was on a little rise of land watching them, and he decided this would be a good time to do some lying down meditation, and he lie on the ground, and then one of the workmen yelled up at him, "Look at that lazy yogi beggar. In a half hour he'll be coming down here trying to beg food. Why don't you come down here and help us?" And Milarepa said, "Oh, I'd love to do that, but I'm trying to do nothing at all, and it's quite difficult enough as it is without without actually taking on something as well." So this is the ideal of meditation, something to strive towards, is this simplicity and of doing absolutely nothing. But because that is actually extremely difficult to do, we try to approach that as closely as we can by doing something very simple, like watching the breath. Well, it's the next best thing to doing nothing at all. Just watch the breath. And if you can just sit there and breathe, then you're meditating perfectly. Of course, as you all can attest from experience, that even that is not immediately easy to do. The mind constantly wants to do other stuff. The mind's always moving and playing with memories or daydreams or projects or whatever it might be. And this is a natural thing. It's a stirring of the mind, but it's something that will and does quiet down with practice. And it allows us to see and experience these thoughts in a new way. We're not taking ownership of them, and we're not validating them or giving them any importance. We're just seeing this is just stuff going on in the mind. Seeing them in the end as essentially empty. We all know that it's possible to have a great deal of suffering that's purely mentally generated. And, extreme cases, people become mentally ill, driven to madness by their thoughts. But more commonly, everybody experiences, anxieties or discontents and suffering from a purely mental content. And this is something that's ultimately not necessary. It's something we can get beyond when we stop taking the mental contents so seriously. We see them as ultimately see them as empty. See them as dependently arisen, without substance. That's one attitude to pick up that will help a lot in all aspects of life, in meditation and in life, is to stop taking your mental states and your thoughts so seriously. Don't make a big drama out of them. They're just empty. They're just stuff happening without any real meaning, without any intrinsic substance behind them. And we can see that when we quiet the thoughts down, even if we don't stop the thinking entirely, if we can at least make it quiescent enough that we can see space between the thoughts and behind the thoughts, then we can begin to access deeper aspects of mind and realize that the thinking process is actually a very superficial aspect of mind. That there's that which is beyond thought. You know, there is the pure knowing. Many years ago, when my teacher Kemananda was dying, and he was in the palliative care ward in the hospital, and I'd go and visit him there. There was a woman in another room in that in the hall who was also, you know, in her last days, and she saw me coming and going in my robes, and she sent one of her children, adult children, to get me, and you know, she wanted to talk to me. And while there was these two, so like a young man and young woman, and this the old woman, the mother, in the bed. And while the kids were present, all the conversation was very superficial. It was just stupid stuff about what was on TV, or, you know, nonsense. But they left pretty quickly, and then she said to me, "I've got liver cancer, and the doctors say I'll be lucky if I live another 6 weeks." And so, you know, I asked her, how do you feel about that now? And she says, "Well, I'm come to peace with it, except for one thing, that I'm afraid of losing my mind before the end." And talking to her, a little bit of a little glimpse of her life story, and she was very, you know, intelligent person, and, you know, more intelligent than average, and also very active in her life, involved in various projects and things, and she very much self-identified with the thinking process. You know, so I told her, yeah, the thinking, your thinking mind will disappear before the rest of it, but there is that pure knowing, there is that beyond the thinking, that even death is not, you know, it's not the end of the pure knowing. The collapse of the thinking mind, collapse of the body, you know, there's still going to be, there's that brilliant light of pure knowing, and that will arise again in another form. And she quite liked that way of speaking, and I think that put her at ease. But it would be good to try and find that sense of pure knowing that's beyond coming and going, is beyond the person, it's beyond the individual. Try to find that while you still have your wits about you, and while you have enough capacity to do so. Don't wait till you're on your last days on your deathbed. It becomes much more difficult. And once you experience that as pure emptiness, it's non-personal, it's not me, not mine, there's no substance there. There's nothing to gain, nothing to lose. Once you experience that, there's no more fear of death. This is unborn, undying. You know, it's difficult to understand. It's subtle. We're not talking about kind of immortality. It's a kind of a soul, because we know the Buddha taught not self, emptiness of self, substance. But death only affects the conditioned. That which is subject to birth is subject to death. You know? So if you cease to identify with any aspect of the conditioned, then there's nothing to lose. So we take up the meditation to, first of all, calm and still the mind, and in that way find peace. So one of the benefits of meditation is said by the Buddha to be a pleasant abiding here and now. I mean, people use it just for that in the world. It's quite a movement of meditation for stress relief, just to get beyond stress and anxiety. And that's, it's valid in itself, but that's actually one of the lesser benefits of meditation. From this still place, then wisdom arises. We begin to know the mind. We begin to understand the nature of the mind. We become more awake. That's what the word Buddha means, is awake. So if we develop some skill in meditation and begin to understand the mind, we're no longer sleepwalking through life. We're no longer just acting and reacting to impulses. We become more conscious. We become more and more master of the pathways of the mind. This is one of the attributes of an arahant, someone who's perfected. It's said to be the masters of the pathway of their own mind. So they only think what they want when they want. And that comes from this development of wisdom. And one of the key aspects, you could almost say it's the key to sorting it all out, is beginning to understand the difference between the knowing and the known, the subject and the object, citta and cittasika. Both sides are ultimately empty and void of substance, dependently arisen. But there is a difference, and this is really the last duality to go, is this difference between the knowing and the known. And as long as you can center your being in the knowing, make that the center, then everything is clear, and you're at peace and you're in control. But what happens again and again, we go out from that still center, we identify with something on the periphery, the objects, the thoughts or the emotions, the memories, the sense impressions, the sights and sounds. We identify with these things, and then we're lost for a time. There's no possibility of freedom there or wisdom there. You're caught in the process. And your vision is necessarily going to be partial as long as you're on the periphery. You know? I think as long as you don't take it too literally, you can think of it as a spatial model, that the knowing mind is at the center and the objects are like arrayed around it. So while you're at the center, you can realize the entirety, but your vision is only ever going to be partial if you're at any point on the periphery. You're at a false center. So thinking arises and we identify with the thought, then we're caught in a spiral of thinking. If emotions arise and we identify with the emotion, then we're caught in an emotional storm. But if we're centered in the knowing, then the emotions or the thoughts can arise and do their thing and process, and we're fully aware of it and we understand what's going on, but we're not identified with it, and it loses its capacity to make us suffer or to knock us off our course and make us act foolishly. So this is, an attitude of mind that we can try and maintain and develop throughout the day, throughout our activities. But this becomes much easier if we have a strong basis in formal practice. As I said at the outset, it's kind of an artificial activity to enable you to do this more difficult inner work by simplifying all the externals. Just sit there and watch the mind, not trying to accomplish anything or do anything, go anywhere, gain anything. No. If you're going into the meditation with a kind of a attitude that's been called spiritual materialism, it's kind of a spiritual greedy mind that wants to attain all these states and gain all this secret esoteric wisdom or knowledge or power, then you're coming into it with the wrong attitude. It's better to think of the whole process as simplification and purification, that we're removing obstructions to access a more natural, primordial state of mind, a more natural, uncluttered state of being. Think of the metaphor of the blue sky mind. This is a very popular image in Tibetan Buddhism, the blue sky mind. The blue sky is always present. It's brilliant blue, beautiful blue sky is always present. Even on a cloudy day, it's just hidden behind the clouds. But that doesn't destroy the blue sky. So what we're trying to do is get beyond the clouds, not lost in the clouds, but to realize the openness and expansiveness, the unobstructedness of the blue sky. And that is our most natural state of being. You can understand the deepening of samadhi and the development of the jhanas in this way. That there's this whole spiritual technology, all these descriptions of jhana states, and you can read whole books written on them. And if it's approached with the idea that these are kind of add-ons, extra special states that we're trying to attain, it's the wrong attitude. Because they're understood. If you read the actual simplest descriptions in the suttas, the jhanas are, each one is a simpler, less cluttered state than the one before. It's a more natural abiding. Sense impression, sense gratification falls away in first jhana, then thought falls away in second jhana, then rapture falls away in third jhana, then bliss falls away in fourth jhana, which is just pure equanimity. So that we're just uncovering deeper layers of the mind that's obscured by the complexities of the lower levels. We're not discovering anything that isn't there already. The more natural, primordial state of mind. This is expressed cosmologically in the Aganya Sutta, in the Sutta of Origins, that the beings that first inhabited this earth were Abhisara level Brahmas, that is second jhana level consciousness, and they became curious about the material form of the surface of the ocean, and they tasted the foam, nutritious foam on the ocean, and that as soon as they took on coarse matter, they fell to earth. Then over many aeons of time, they devolved into the sorry specimens that, walk around on 2 feet today, we call humans. This mythological framework has a number of deep truths hidden in it. And one is this, one of the really important points is that these original beings were second jhana level, this was their native consciousness. So that when we are practicing meditation, in this sense, we're not trying to discover something new, we're trying to remember something that was native to us long ago, and we've forgotten it because we've allowed to take on many more coarse levels of stuff in the mind. You don't have to interpret this literally and as a literal historical development on the earth, but mythologically, cosmologically, it's expressing this, that the mind is intrinsically more pure and pristine and uncluttered and unbounded, really, unobstructed, but that it gets caught. It tastes the nutritious foam, and it gets caught in materiality, and it gets caught in the busyness of thought, and it gets tangled. And the natural clarity and expansiveness and brilliance of the mind is lost. It's not destroyed, it's just hidden. It's buried under layers and layers of tangled rubbish. And we're trying to simplify that. We're trying to let that just fade away and pass away and experience the clarity and purity that lies underneath. Well, that's what essentially we're doing with the meditation.
Sadhu,